Lami and Bacon, my brothers. Very, very welcome to, yeah, very welcome to this ad hoc, off the cuff episode. Today we're discussing with my very special guests. We've got Dr. Kuffar Phobia and Dr. Paul Sutliff. Don't believe him when he says he is not a doctor. And we've got the snake eater with us today, someone I met. We started talking about, well, about Islam and his first exposure to Islam. He's going to tell us his story, why he got drawn into it, why he felt compelled to actually then dig in more as he started learning more, and what he found, his experiences. And it was, for me, it was a fascinating story. And hopefully he's got some good questions to ask us. And we as a panel can discuss for a little while and just remind people about Islam from a beginner perspective and refresh people's memories on some of the issues that we know very well because we sit with it every day. But some of you may have some questions. So hopefully you can all relate, learn something, and yeah, it's welcome. Paul, Dr. K, and Snake Eater, welcome, guys.
Hey, welcome, welcome.
Hello, hello, hello.
Can't hear you now suddenly, Paul. Can't hear a word. You're muted. Did you do something strange, Paul?
Yeah, he's muted. I can't hear you.
Yeah, we suddenly can't hear you. That's a question we can answer. Here's an interesting question. Why do Muslims dislike philosophy? Paul, try and fix that, please, please, please. I'm going to get into that for a moment. You know what? That's a very good question. Yeah, I wonder what happened there with Paul. Let's try and find this. Yeah, let's give Paul a moment. You know that it's not as people have said to me, it's not a proper Lloyd De Jongh stream if we don't have audio issues, right? It's like,
Testing,
okay,
test,
so
1, 2, 3.
you are back, thank heavens.
All right.
As you know, Allah and the jinn work in mysterious ways, and you can see that when you're over the target, the audio issues start. And the jinn, so thanks for all the prayers, guys. The jinn have now been exorcised from Paul's computer. Okay, wait, let me show something, guys. The question was, before we dive in with Snake Eater, this is from the Sharia manual, the Reliance of the Traveler, the Umdat al-Salik, and it is forbidden for Muslims to learn philosophy because it falls under the umbrella of unlawful knowledge. And unlawful knowledge starts with learning sorcery because it is unlawful. And the scholars have decisively stated you also can't learn philosophy, magic, astrology, and any atheist nonsense. I can agree with the last one, but philosophy is up there with magic, astrology, and sorcery. Does anyone have a comment? Snake Eater, I'll start with you. What are your thoughts on making this discovery?
This is kind of a weird one. So I guess it's like I like to think of myself as kind of a logical person. Like, hey, like you give me information, A is equal to B, or like if you can give me an argument that makes sense, then I'll follow it, right? But like in having some Muslim friends and like having debates with them, they will say that they're coming from a logical perspective as well. But sometimes it's like if you can't form like an argument that's like airtight, then how can you really argue for a point or against a point? It's like I'd always kind of end up in these circular arguments, and I didn't understand why I was ending up in some of these circular arguments. But like, yeah, like understanding words like hiyal and like takia and stuff like that give like context to why these arguments are circular. I guess I just want to like apologize to the audience first of all before like we even start. Is like I'm kind of approaching this from like a beginner's perspective. So if I don't seem like as versed, like that's why. Like, and I think that's kind of what I want to bring to you. Is just like, hey, like it's okay to ask questions. I have a lot of questions. I have a lot of question marks because like I think a lot of us are trying to figure out what's happening here and like what to learn next.
Okay, yeah, so I'll show one more thing. So guys, Christmas is approaching. As you can see here, we have the 5 pillars of Islam. So please make sure that your Christmas market, especially if you're in Europe, has the 5 pillars of Islam, and we all know why. Okay? So, I mean, there's a quiz I want to put up that says, like, you know, when does the bomb go off? After you hear Jesus is Lord, after you hear Hare Krishna, or after you hear, what's the correct answer, Paul?
make sure you have the bollards to stop the bombs.
Exactly, or the car, or because as you all know, you hear the bomb goes off after you hear Allahu Akbar. Okay, enough of that. So, yeah. So Snake Eater,
Century Sincere. Look at that. Century Sense. She named it. Or she or
welcome.
he named it. Yeah.
Allahu Akbarius. Allahu Akbarius. Yeah. So guys, on this stream, part of the aim is we want to increase Islamophobia. Okay, so we need there's far too little of that stuff going around. So yeah, so over to you, Snake Eater. So tell us your story, how you got into this, what happened in the beginning.
Sure. So I guess it's like it kind of started off really innocently. Like I had a friend who's I still kind of do have a friend who's is Muslim, and we'd get into little like discussions about Islam and like Catholicism, but I never really had any knowledge of really either to in depth to really counter any of the arguments, right? So just one day I'm on YouTube, maybe like 2 weeks ago, and I was just like, all right, let me see like one of these ex-Muslim videos. It just kind of was on my feed. I was like, all right, let me just get a little bit of ammunition.
Well, what are the kind of things he was telling you or saying
It'd be
to
kind
you?
of like innocuous things, like little subtle jabs. Like it would be like, oh, like, hey, like you're a good Muslim or something. I'm like, what do you mean I'm a good Muslim? He's like, oh, we're all good, like we're all Muslims by birth, right? And I'm like, well, I'm not a Muslim, right? And that'd be kind of like the end of the discussion. Or it'd be like just stuff on that level where it's just like they're throwing out. It's kind of like a feeler, like it's kind of like throwing out little jabs, right? And I'd be kind of like trying to counter, like just kind of like head bob backwards. I'm like, whoa, I don't know. What
They feel like manipulative assertions.
I think it was just more to just see like how pliable I was, like to see like, okay, like maybe just like what I'm willing to take in. So, but I was kind of just like, I don't believe in this stuff. So like, leave me alone on it. Right. So that's where it kind of got. But every once in a while, the discussion would come up and I'd say, hey, like, I don't believe in that stuff, whatever. But anyway, so for this context, I wanted to get some kind of like counter ammunition. So be like, all right, next time I'll go out and throw some couple jabs back, right? And as I started learning about this stuff, it's like via the ex-Muslims in the community on YouTube, I kind of just started having more and more questions where it's just like, wait a minute, like let's say like the most jugular topic, which is like the consummation between Muhammad and Aisha. It's like that's like a big deal. Like that's not something you can just look at and just look away from, right? It's like, okay, cool. Like I guess this like coming, if this was like from a non-Muslim, the information coming, I would question a lot more, maybe be more skeptical of it than ex-Muslims telling me that this bothered them. So I was just like, oh, like if this made them leave the faith or the deen, then I was just like, what else do they have to say?
Right.
So yeah, like it just. So I guess as like I jumped into that and started learning about that. You started learning about different things. I guess after going through some of like the ex-Muslim creators on YouTube, I went through maybe like 4 or 5 of them, and then I kind of landed on Lloyd's video on monotheism, right? And that was to me like the ice bucket of Islam, like just a bucket of ice water on my head, because this kind of gave me like a historical context of where this emerged from, like historically, kind of like this symbology behind it, and like some of like the just the aspects that are unclear about it, like just kind of like
the
it
fact
gave
that
some language to it.
It's really alien. It's not Western. It is not remotely European or Christian. It is completely alien. It's a different culture, a different time, a different thinking completely to us. Would you agree with that?
I think it's like when you get into the things like relativism, that's where it really becomes alien, where it becomes like hard to operate in that context where it's not one for one. It's not like I give you this, you give me that back. It's I give you this, you get something else back that may not be relative to what you gave. So like it's not like the information is being like sent back and forth in the same pipeline, right? It's just it can be really confusing.
I think the issue here is not necessarily the word relativism, but duality. It's hard to understand the language because they will change the language. and that's part of Islam. They redefine things so you can't understand things.
Yeah.
So that's another
which is,
problem
which is
altogether.
which is a Gnostic tactic.
Yes.
So that's the Gnostics take over, they burrow into, they take over concepts, embed their concepts, and it sounds just like yours, but it's confusing. But I was saying to him earlier, there's a relativism in the morality as well, because
Yes.
they will have one set. I mean, basically, Islam has principles, and if you don't like those, or if they aren't suitable, they have other principles too. So, so there's that problem, because Allah has no. There is literally nothing in the Sharia that cannot be ignored, broken, violated, turned upside down, delayed, postponed, forgotten, for whatever reasons. I mean,
And that's
literally nothing
because
is sacred.
Allah is the God of perhaps.
Yeah,
But I think
and also to
Carlo Baker in the chat
Mhm.
is like saying exactly what kind of like happened to me, where she's like, your friend would be like, yo, you'd be a great Muslim though. And it's like, huh? Like it's just like this subtle, I guess manipulation is like a little,
yeah, he's been yeah.
yeah, it's a
Okay.
subtle manipulation, right? Of the context. It's just like you'd be a great Muslim. It's like I don't want to be a Muslim. Like I mean, like I never said I wanted to be, right? So it's just constant
Look, I
like
mean,
throwing it on you, right?
a couple of
How
things
about
though. Islam has few people realize that Islam has it's got a certain type of language, a certain type of speech, that there's a certain quality or character to the speech which goes back centuries, goes back 1,000 years, and it's called Samia. Samia, and a lot of this is going to sound weird to people. I mean, I talk about these things on the channel. These are things that are very rarely investigated. I've never dug into it. I've shown it here. I've gone through the references, but I've never really dug into it. But Samia is what they call letter magic. So letter magic is, besides its occult aspects and the esoteric, it's got the aspect of persuasion, convincing. This also forms part of what they call hiyal, right? But it's to persuade. It's not to find the truth. It is to persuade, regardless. It is to win the argument. But we would think of it as NLP. We would think of it as language
Mm.
designed to manipulate and undermine. It's a very subtle, very effective form of NLP, which is over 1,000 years old. Any thoughts from you guys? And your reaction to that, Snake?
I guess like I think that's hilarious because like this guy was into NLP and stuff like that. So like you mentioned it, but like it just I don't know, I guess that's just a connection, right, Dave? Like,
It's something only the scholars know. It's not something the average Muslim will know. But the thing is that the it's embedded in the culture. It's part of the fabric. You're not going to get it out. Just like jinn and magic and witchcraft is embedded in the fabric. You can't get it out. It's there. Paul, I see you.
I think
thinking
the
hard.
most interesting thing when you start talking about what you said was forbidden is the average person in Islam knows very little about what they believe. They might know something about Sharia, but they don't read the Quran. And my goal is always to get Muslims to read the Quran because then they leave Islam. And that's one of the things. I read Sharia, they'll leave Islam. Read Islamic literature, you'll leave Islam. Yeah, read the sources, you will leave Islam. And that's my challenge to you, to get him to sit down and better yet, you could say, can we read the chapter of Yusuf, and we'll read it from the Quran first, and then we'll go look it up in Genesis and see if they compare, because the Quran is supposed to be another, it's supposed to endorse these previous books, okay, but the Quran doesn't have any answers. Doesn't
It's
have
got
any
less
details.
information and doesn't add anything of value. Dr.
Yes.
K, anything from you?
Well, since you pointed out that according to Sharia, philosophy is is a no-no,
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of weird that there are a lot of Muslims like Jake the metaphysician who strictly, do the debates, especially comparing Christianity to Islam based on philosophy, yet they're not supposed to.
That's not for the average Muslim, but he's doing something to the. Remember, there's every single rule in the Sharia can be suspended for a given reason. You can violate literally every rule in the Sharia because Islam is not a moral system; it's a legal system, and there are legal loopholes. And Allah Himself is like God's nature is God only tells truth. God is only good. He does no evil. He does not lie. Whereas Allah has to be the supreme liar. He has to be the best liar. To limit Allah is to sin against Allah. So Allah has to be greater than Satan. Allah has to be the best at everything and the worst at everything. Otherwise, you limit him. He must have no limits, which means that Allah is ultimately evil.
He is the best of deceivers, isn't he? That's exactly where we're going.
You know, what are you guys' thoughts on that?
I guess it's just like it leads me to the idea of like Carlo here is speaking my language, right? Where it's just like he's saying like not everything is based on reason, brother. Like he'd be in an argument. Like sometimes it like I'd be drawn to this like debate. He's like, oh, I want to debate. I'm like, I don't want to talk about this because I don't have like enough knowledge to really have a substantial conversation, right? But it's just the idea of like, oh, I want to debate. But I'm like, it doesn't feel like they want to learn as much as like sometimes just I guess just to reaffirm their belief. So just like I don't know, that was just kind of. But to your question, I guess before is it leaves me in this kind of moral quandary, right? Or this like kind of not moral quandary on my part, but it means like this question I have, this weird mire, where I'm just like, I don't know what the intention is of what this person is telling me. Do you know what I mean? Like, what seemed innocent now doesn't seem very innocent anymore.
You've picked up on probably the most important thing. There is nothing innocent about his saying, "Oh, you're a good Muslim." His purpose is to get you to convert to Islam, so you can be deceived. Now, if you convert to Islam and you decide to go back, oh, then they can chop off your head.
Yeah, which is like just pretty serious, right?
But they don't tell you that until after you become Muslim.
Yeah. And even to the point of debating, right? You're saying, I guess, Paul, you're saying take the Sharia to them and be able to like to read along with them, isn't it?
I say get them to read their Quran, make them read it out loud.
Okay.
And I think it's funny because most of them have never done it.
Because Sharia is like forbidden, is it not, Lloyd?
Well, I'm saying use the Quran or use the Sharia.
Sure.
It doesn't matter. I mean, get them to read it out loud, and then challenge them, and I ask them if you're reading the book of Yusuf, ask them, okay, serious questions like, okay, who are Joseph's brothers? What? There's none of them listed.
Ask him about Noah's Ark. How was the Ark constructed? Tell me about it, because it literally says not a thing about the actual boat. Nothing.
Yes.
Not a word. So why are we reading the story? Because the Bible has a lot of detail. There's a question here from Divine Mercy. So guys, the aim is to encourage conversation, encourage questions, and we'll try and deal with these because I think all of us handle these issues. I'll show something that happened to me today for that matter, because I have regular online whack job discussions, but Divine Mercy asks, Lloyd, regarding the legal infrastructure, do you think there was any other entity through history that had a similar makeup? Two things. One, there's of course the Talmud, which everyone is now going to start misrepresenting and lying about, which is going to be very annoying to me because I really don't appreciate that when people start doing that. But that said, a lot of the Sharia is an inversion of the Talmud. You can see they were trying to make a competing Talmud. They wanted to make something that was as representative of a legal system as the Talmud, but they wanted one that was better. And of course, you can find a lot of moral inversion. They literally upend a lot of the claims. 99% of the claims people make about the Talmud are just false. And then where they do speak the truth, that they usually misrepresent it or stretch it. But also, you will find in the late first, early second century, there are certain rules along with a Gnostic group. Thank you very much, Harold. Thank you for your kindness. Really appreciate it for that. He says a small gift for the ministry, and God bless Gopherwood and Pitch. Thank you. There's a Gnostic group from the late first, early second century that had very similar ideas to Islam. So this actually goes back to a group that, like Taqiyya, the whole concept of Taqiyya, that you can trace to a Gnostic group that dates as early as 115 AD. And so you find some of that there, and they come from Iran, basically what we call Iran today. hopefully that answers and that provides some clarity. Any thoughts from you guys before I? Yeah. So Snake Eater, you asked me something a month ago about people can't talk about the Sharia, it's illegal. So someone posted this today. I'll just have to go backwards through this. So someone tagged me on Twitter, someone I don't know, tagged me on Twitter, and they asked me a question. And this guy says we have to ask him if he knows the word taqiyya. Something spelled taqiyya comes from Arabic, which means prudence and fear. So a cautionary practice consisting of undue duress of concealing or denying one's blah blah. Not that this is untrue, but it's not the complete truth. So I quoted them, look here, I said hiyal is the main umbrella of obligatory lying in Islam. However, I said there are two different uses of taqiyya by Ibn Taymiyyah, and he is the primary scholar on jihad in Islam. And I said one is to deceive Muslims. Sorry, one is to deceive non-Muslims by being friendly, besides protecting yourself from harm, like the Shia against the Sunni. Couple of points. Okay, I'll get to those. So one is to deceive non-Muslims by being friendly to them, and the other is a calculated deception. So in the religious and moral doctrine of jihad, Ibn Taymiyyah says, and he's a Sheikh al-Islam, he says taqiyya is calculated deception. And then he also mentions here, taqiyya is being friendly with them in order to avoid harm, right? Or to manipulate them, to betray them. So this guy was making comments to the other guys saying, oh, you just make things up. So I said, okay, look, I tell you what, buddy. So I posted a few things. I posted a few others. For instance, one is entitled to lie in Islam. Compare the bad consequences of lying to those entailed by telling the truth. And if the consequences of telling the truth are damaging, you are entitled to lie. They'll gaslight you and ignore the facts that they see on the page. But basically, it is not unlawful to lie when the goal that you are looking to attain can only be attained through lying. Right? This is blatant. It is permissible to lie if attaining the goal that you are seeking is permissible, and it is obligatory to lie if the goal is obligatory. So this from a legal standpoint, but this is embarrassing. Anything that embarrasses Islam must be hidden. So I told him, look, tell you what, if I'm lying, why don't you do a live stream with me? And we go through the text and you can expose me. And of course they won't. I mean, people just won't, because I do this all the time. I say, you know what, that's great. Let's do a live stream. Let's do this. And we go through the text and expose me, because you've got nothing to fear, because Sharia law is awesome. And they never do that because they know they'll get wrecked. Your comments, guys, your thoughts?
I think it just from another perspective, it's they kind of have an incentive here, right? Because it's how can you be honest and in a debate and an honest conversation when the downside of losing that conversation is apostasy, right? It's can a Muslim come out and be someone who believes in Islam come out and be yes, what you're saying is right? Then that puts them in the wrong. And then if they're in a foreign country, what are the consequences of that? I mean, some of them have banned VPN, so they whatever they're saying online is being tracked. What are the consequences of them sticking out in their neighborhood? I don't blame them to a certain degree, because it's yeah, okay, if the consequence is death, you're gonna lie. I mean, so it's I don't know. It just puts this weird aura around the whole interaction, right? It's we're not interacting the same way, right?
Yeah, we have different purposes, different aims. Paul, your thoughts?
I think the entire purpose for their communication with you is deception, and that is the thing you have to begin with. Their goal is to deceive you, to make you believe as they do. I actually put together what I would consider my top 4 things I would say about Islam, and I would say, first of all, you have to know that Islam is not a religion.
Yeah.
They will say it themselves. They'll say it's not a religion. They'll say it's a complete way of life. Well, what do they mean by that? They're talking about the Sharia. They're not talking about anything else. They're talking about the Sharia. Then they'll say, then you ask them what Islam means. They say it means peace. This is my number 2. Islam means submission. And then you have to ask, what is submission to what? Is it to Allah or is it to the Sharia? Depends on who you're talking to. And if it's to Sharia, we have other problems, because they believe it's a complete way of life for all non-Muslims too. So you have to follow their laws. That means if you're married, they can break up your marriage. I mean, this goes on and on and on. They can rape your wives. They can. I mean, this is lawfully put into Sharia, and goes on and on. So that's the other thing. Abrogation, I would put as number 3 about what we should know about Islam. Abrogation is Islam's way of dealing with contradiction. That's how it's taught originally. Okay, but when you think about abrogation, it gets rid of all the peaceful verses in Islam. There's nothing peaceful about Islam. So now you're definitely stuck with, okay, Islam is violent. Okay. And then number 4 that I have, jihad is the 6th pillar. This is where Usama Dakdak and I disagree. He says it's the 7th pillar. I say it's the 6th. That's about the only difference. We both agree it's a pillar. War against non-Muslims. That's the Islamic definition of jihad. So it's not a non-violent struggle. No, that's made up BS. I'm sorry. Read their books. Find out. Don't trust what I'm saying, or don't trust what Lloyd's saying. This is why he just said he'll do live streams, trying to get people to come on and join him and debate him. Lloyd does what I do, which is he puts up the material and he shows them. Right? I mean, so you can't question it. So this is the purpose. I mean, this is probably why you have an interest in what Lloyd's doing, is because he puts this stuff up, and it's hard to disagree. Kuffar and I did live streams on going through the Quran. We read through the Quran. I don't know how many hours we put in. We felt like we lost many brain cells.
Yeah, it was 10 months, 69 episodes. I'd say about 120 hours to 150.
Yeah, because you'd read something, you're like, does anybody understand what we just read? Was there any details in what we just read? You feel dumber for what you just read. Yeah, there was a lot of that. And then there's things you just sit there and like, wait, you can't ask questions? What kind of faith structure is this? How are you supposed to learn if you can't ask questions?
Yeah, and it can buy a donkey. Yeah. And look here, I mean, lying is obligatory. This is in the Sharia, the most popular and most well-authenticated Sharia manual in the world. So obligatory lying. I mean, that's in there in black and white.
That's the index, or sorry, that's the chapter
index,
heading. Yeah, chapter index. Yeah, crazy.
Yeah, I mean, this is there in black and white, and they explain this, and you can go into other texts by other scholars who write about how all these rules apply. So, Snake Eater, your thoughts on this? I mean, it says here in black and white. I mean, what did you think about learning this?
That was really shocking. Like, that was really shocking. Like, shocking is the only word I can use. It's just like, I don't know, like Christian faith has like, thou shalt not lie. Like, it's just like, that's the thing. Like, the 10 commandments, you just don't lie. So it's like, we all know lying is like amoral if it's dependent. Like, there's no lying for good reason. It's just tell the truth, right? But to be like, there's like, I think you said it really well with your like, the Inuit or the Eskimos have 28 or 8 different words for snow. They have multiple words for snow, for texture, to define its uses, right? Multiple words. So in Islam, they have multiple words to define like lying. So, but this emphasizes that this is an important concept in the language, right? So if it's not important, the Inuit people who live in the snow wouldn't need to know the different types of snow, right?
Well, if you think about it, hiyal, which is the umbrella term for all deception in Islam, for all of the methods of lying, is a military strategic term. So it falls under a military strategy to win a war against you.
Yeah, so when you hear stuff like that, it's just like it's hard to not be taken aback. Like you're just like, what am I dealing with, right?
Actually, so this says here, by definition, we are all Muslims created from the purity of the light of God. Now that is not entirely true. You were created from the light of Muhammad. Your soul, is a piece of Muhammad. Muhammad is a piece of Allah. Muhammad is the biggest piece of Allah. Allah took a piece of his own purity and he made the soul of Muhammad, who was in paradise and was worshipped by the angels for 100,000 years. And then he broke off tiny pieces of Muhammad's soul and he made Adam and David and Abraham and Jesus. and then he made you as well. That's why you're a Muslim, because part of your soul is actually, it's whatever. That's what they believe.
And I think it's that thing too, where it's just like it's almost like superseding all religions. Like that kind of boggled me too, where it's like other religions, like they made space for each other. Like Buddhism doesn't come and say we're all Buddhists. Like Christianity doesn't come and say we're all Christians. It's like, okay, it makes space for you to convert, right? But it's just this like, oh, we're all by definition, like something about that just seems very wrong.
Well, it says here, as you say, so there are erroneous theories advanced by some teachers affirming Christianity, Judaism, and other religions, but they deny or do not mention they are all abrogated, and it is unbelief or kufr, which is the penalty is death, to hold that the remnant cults now bearing the names of formerly valid religions like Christianity and Judaism are acceptable to Allah after He sent Muhammad to the entire world. This is a matter over which there is no disagreement among the scholars. So yes, every other religion has been cancelled. Adiz, stop with this Gnostic trash. I have zero patience for it. I am not very patient. This is Gnosticism. This is nonsense. It stops here and now. Volunteer to stop, or I will stop you. Yeah, next point, guys. Oh.
So I guess like another thing that comes up that I learned about was this concept of zakat, right? And that all Muslims pay zakat. So this brings me to like the moral quandary of myself, which is if they're engaged in jihad, which is the struggle, and zakat contributes to the struggle, am I, by promoting the businesses or engaging like with sharing money with, is that furthering jihad? Like,
You're asking the right questions. And if you're contributing to, or you're purchasing items that are halal, stamped halal, this is something we all need to be concerned about. If you're purchasing anything that has a halal stamp, you are contributing towards wealth. And this is the other thing. You have to remember, this is wealth. Zakat is a wealth tax. So if they create wealth, it's held for a year, then they have to pay more zakat. And yes, 1/7, I believe it's 1/7 of all income, all wealth must be paid to jihad. So it's actually higher than that. And that's after you study, the categories, you'll see that. But pay attention, and it's just, and you have to be careful when you're even giving to places where the Islamic organizations will say they qualify as a zakat. They're zakatable. Start looking as to what do they mean by zakatable. What category do they use? And sometimes they use the category for jihad. They just don't explain it.
and that's really like, I think like it's normal for, I think we all understand with like the woke movement that it's like, okay, like go woke, go broke. That it's just like, if a business is acting woke and you're not in agreement with these values they're soliciting or endorsing, then you just withhold your cash, right? Like, all right, I'm going to take my money to another business, right? So in this same scenario, it's like, okay, cool. Like if you're contributing to causes I don't believe in, and like using money that I think in a way that's morally wrong, then I guess it's my moral civic duty to not engage with you financially, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, remember, but they do say they're going to destroy us with our own miserable hands. We are going to tolerate, we're going to permit, we're going to, bend over backwards to appease, and we're going to pay for it. And we do. I mean, look what's happening in the UK. The UK has gone culturally insane, and they're funding their own demise. I mean, they're cutting off pensions, they're cutting off funding for their pensioners to pay for heating, for food, that they're increasing their taxes, they're cutting their pensions, they are denying them work, and they're feeding men, able-bodied men who don't work, who they give housing and all medical and all possible benefits to it. It's insanity.
And you'll see this, in Sweden and Denmark, all these crazy countries, like including the United States, Germany. I can go on and on naming all these countries that are currently giving tons of income to Muslims who just come to their country. And the Muslims turn around and say, uh, this is our due. They consider this what they'll tell you over and over again. This is our due. This is what we deserve because you're the dhimmis and you're paying us. What's the right word, Lloyd?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're paying what's due because you are submitting, and this is, I mean, this is the foolishness that I get angry when I think about this because I think, well, in the United States we have something called a State Department. Depends on what country you're in, which country is supposed to deal with foreign relations. They're supposed to know how to deal with these other countries, and if they don't know how to do it, we have a problem. They need to do that. They need to do it correctly. And you should not be paying somebody anything, especially when they're taking it as a sign of submission. And that's problematic.
Yeah. Dr. K, any thoughts, any comments from your side? You're a little quiet out there.
Maybe he's away from the mic. He might have walked away.
Yeah. So there was something any other thoughts you want to throw at us? I mean, any other things? Because you mentioned Aisha, which is a common tactic. I mean, that's a bit of a controversial one because some say don't do it. It's so harsh and so blatant and so nasty, and then others are like, yeah, jump on that button. But what are your thoughts there? I mean, what was your reaction to finding out about that?
Well, finding out about it is it's atrocious, right? It's disgusting. Like it's not good. Like it's not good. But like having it as the main soft point, like I think it's almost become like if you address that topic, you're almost like coming at them too directly, coming at the issue too directly. So it's like, and I think they've built up a lot of like not defensiveness around it, but it's just like from what I hear is like it's the one like people who are non-Muslims use to broach Islam, right? Like to really reprimand Islam. But it's like I think it's valid and a really big point. But I also think like, all right, cool. If like that won't do, we'll pull up issue number 2, issue number 3, issue number 4, issue number 5. Like there's like an overwhelming amount of evidence to really like prove the case, right?
There is plenty of evidence. This is why people don't want to have those Sharia discussions with me.
I mean, Eric has taken this apart. I don't know how many times on his show, and then we always run into this guy named Kenny Bomber who insists she was 18. He actually had a debate with David Wood. If you want to see someone cry on live in a debate, you'll see that. Sadly enough, the guy came on and he kept insisting Aisha was 18. Well, it was funny. This debate was so funny because David Wood used Islamic sources from the beginning to the end.
Right.
All right. But Kenny Bomber didn't use any sources except for modern scholars. So
Really?
it's hilarious.
That is crazy. I mean, for instance, just to run you through, I mean, you've seen this stuff, Snake Eater, but for the audience that hasn't, these are the main sources used in Pakistan, probably India as well, that part of the world. The Hidayah, 4 volumes, is about 2,650 pages, available in my archive. You can download it there. And the Digest of Muhammadan Law. These are the 2 top sources of Sharia used in Islamic courts in Pakistan. And I cover these these are by 2. They're currently both PhD professors. So the other assistant got his PhD. And this is the Digest of Muhammadan Law. And we can read when a man has had, this is from the Digest of Muhammadan Law, which is mentioned here as the second most important source of Islamic law used in courts in Pakistan today. When a man has had sexual intercourse with a girl under the age of 9 years and has ruptured the parts, I'm not sure what parts they could be referring to here, it is unlawful for him to have further connection with her, but she is not released from her ties, if connected with him by marriage or slavery. If no rupture, in other words, he has not torn her, the word is vajayjay, open, then the prohibition is not incurred and he can continue having his way with her. And this is the most valid opinion. And under 9 years would mean well, you pick the age. Your thoughts on that, Snake Eater?
I think one of the things that like is on my mind is that this guy would be like, that I was talking to would be like, oh, if I were to come to like UK or something and I do something, whatever, it'd be under Sharia, so like I wouldn't even apply to the local land's laws. And a part of me was like, oh, okay, like that's kind of unique, weird, but I didn't have the language to understand where this mentality
So
came from, right?
yeah, take it this way. Ask him if he believes Muhammad is perfect. And if he says yes, are you saying it's perfect to be a pedophile?
Yeah.
It's not. I mean, you can ask those questions directly. He's the one who made the claim Muhammad's perfect, and his wife is the one who claims he had sex with her at the age of 9 in lunar years.
Which would be about, what, 8 years and 7 months old or something like that.
Yes.
Yeah, I calculated it once, about 8 years and 7 months.
Ugh.
So this is only one example. There is no waiting period for a woman divorced before having had sexual intercourse with her husband, but a waiting period is obligatory for a woman divorced after intercourse, whether the husband and wife are prepubescent, have reached puberty, or one has reached puberty but the other has not. Intercourse means copulation. So this is very, very clear. This is very clear. I mean, we can go through example after example, and it makes me want to throw up when I read this stuff. And the Muslims want to deny this, but yeah, this is what the Sharia is, and why they don't want to talk to me about it.
It's codified. You have to look at this as codified sickness. Codified mental illness? No, I think codified sinfulness. This is disgusting. There's no way to put it other than that. This is their legality of Allah's law. This is their statement of their little God's law. The law. Allah. The law.
Yeah. So someone just sent me a question on X. They tagged me and they sent me, what is the meaning of Sharia in the UK? And I'm not sure what exactly they mean, but the thoughts on that, Paul. What do you think they would mean by what is the meaning of Sharia in the UK?
I think it's becoming so. In the UK, you have Sharia courts in the UK. So I think they're really questioning not necessarily what the meaning of it is the power of it. What can it control? In the UK, they have been granted some power to make some decisions, usually based on the family. Now, this creates huge problems because the woman has no legal representation in many ways. The woman is counted as less than a man. So if a woman would decide to accept a decision made in a Sharia court, which I think she'd have to be wholly lost. Maybe she might be the one to demonstrate the loss of her brain if she would do that. Not having the brain that Islam says she doesn't, that would create a problem.
Yeah. So what do I answer him? He says, what does Sharia law mean in the UK? So what should I tell him? It means that there's a parallel legal system, and that it now supersedes or replaces the British Western legal system. And this means that women have fewer rights, men have more rights, and ultimately you are endorsing. Okay. Yeah. So back to you then. Yeah. So these Sharia courts do mean that a man can marry an underage girl. There's the slippery slope, unfortunately. Yeah. Your thoughts, Snake Eater, back to you.
Well, it comes back to I think I'm not in the UK, so I'm not aware of all that's going on there. But I see snippets of just MPs protesting against laws banning cousin marriage, right? I'm like, wait a minute, what do you mean? This isn't something you want to protest a ban against. Yeah, cousin marriage should be prohibited. That's just not how it goes, right?
I saw that protest. I saw the member of parliament Iqbal Muhammad present, and he lied through his teeth as he presented. He said that all over the Middle Eastern world and all over Asia and Africa, where they have cousin marriage legal, they have a genetic test that they have to do before they get married. That's a bunch of hooey. I'm sorry. In fact, I'm talking with Isam about it. He's like, he's from Egypt. He says, he's never heard of anything like that.
They do this in the UAE. By the way, guys, if you want to get your camel urine supplies, let me know. I will be happy to ship it to you, okay? Because so in the UAE they do that. There's a couple of countries where they do that. UAE is one. You have to get a test before you can get married, and if unfortunately there's been too much, shall we say, family inbreeding, then they deny the marriage.
Oh wow.
Yeah, technically, it's not in the Quran, player faint. In the Sharia, there is no lower age limit for marriage. So there's literally no limit. Let me show you that example here. Infant wife, adultery. I mean, for instance, has your infant wife, an infant in Islam, in the Sharia, is defined as a baby in the cradle. So a husband who accuses his wife of adultery is disciplined, especially when adultery is impossible, such as when the person accused is a mere infant. Because your wife slept with another man, but you're accusing her of being at fault. Well, she was 3 months old. What do you mean? It was his fault. She didn't come onto him. I'd say that's pretty gross.
Yeah, it's bad. People don't realize how disgusting this is, and when you start looking at the Sharia, it kind of makes you. Yeah, I'm doing a show later tonight on some, not on this one, but on we're talking about marriage. We're going to talk about the legalized abuse. Yeah.
And also, they're going to abuse that system. They're going to have multiple wives, each with one kid who's now getting benefits. Because in the UK, single mother gets a house and a stipend. So the man has 10 wives, whatever, I don't know, 4 wives. He's got 4 houses, and he gets maintenance for all of them. I mean, that's abusing the system heavily.
But one of the things I guess we were talking about earlier, Lloyd, was just like educating people, right? It's like I guess like Islam has madrasas to like educate people from a young age to understand the concepts of Islam, right? It's like, how are we educating people who are new to studying Islam? It's like, I think we have to like create some type of introduction. Like, I think sometimes the water bucket is good. Sometimes people need a straw, but it's just like I think as us people who are understanding Islam, we have to like create a structure of like, okay, this is what you should. These are like the ABCs of Islam. Like, I mean, like really, like. I think
I've done that. It's always more like a bucket of ice water.
Yeah.
And there's no way you can do it otherwise. I'm sorry. You need when you discuss Islam, you get a bucket of ice water in the face. There's no quiet and nicey way to say this. Islam is not an Abrahamic faith, just so people understand that. Yes, there is a relation to the people of that call themselves from Ishmael are lying through their teeth because they have no relation to Ishmael. They are from Keturah, one of Abraham's other wives, after Ishmael's mother died. So you think about that. I mean, Ishmael lived on the border between Israel and Egypt. His mother was from Egypt. They lived, that's where Ishmael went. They didn't go to the Middle East. All right. His people were from Keturah, and the Keturah says there, when you read Genesis, Keturah's children went to the east, not Ishmaelites.
Hey, this is in a response to, I guess, Ryan's comment here about like in polite settings, people would rather avoid, deny, or engage things that would rather trigger discuss responses. I've just started to ask people questions about it. Like, hey, like people just ask me, oh, what have you been up to? I'd be like, all right, just learning about Islam. And they'll be, oh, what about it? And it's just like, all right, cool. Like, you just get into it, right? Like, eventually I find that people kind of like, oh, like, I think that's all I want to know for today. Like, but it's like, yeah, like, but you got to broach the subject. Like, you have to. Like,
you have to, because look, sorry, Paul, just in one moment. They go to, so when they're little kids, they do, I think, what's called tarbiyah, which is behavioral training. Right. So before they start going to mosque, they go to little madrasas, right? Now, for instance, this is a madrasa manual. This is a group called Islamic Circle of North America. They're very well known. These wonderful, wonderful, very moderate, fantastic, modern, really fun, blah 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 blah. Okay.
Civilization jihadis.
Yep. So let's have a quick look. Let's go back to where we were with these guys. Let's go to find that reference again. So now this is what they're teaching to kids from, now this will be from kids probably from like 8 to 14, 8 to 12, something like that, because they have different classes for younger kids, right? But the books are similar. They just say the same things milder. Take jihad, for instance, since some of our young people today have become very interested in it. No doubt it is a great act of devotion. They're not saying don't do it. They say, oh, that's good stuff, you kiddie. Go kill the kafir. The Prophet said there are 100 levels in paradise that Allah has prepared for those who engage in jihad for the cause of Allah, right? The pinnacle of Islam is jihad in the way of Allah. So these guys are like really making a big deal out of it. And they tell us here in the footnotes, the word Allah used is wajahada fi sabilillah, meaning jihad in the path of Allah. It is incorrect to translate the word jihad to mean strive or striving or struggle, because jihad is a legal terminology with a specific meaning, and that is fighting in the path of Allah and the struggle therein. Translating the word jihad to mean striving is misleading, as it gives a different meaning to the intended meaning in the verse. Your thoughts on that, Snake and Paul?
It's wild.
And I will point, this is from America. ICNA is one of the recognized groups of the Muslim Brotherhood. ISNA has something similar they've put out. It's been a while since I've looked at that. But this is, again, this information that ICNA just did a big, huge thing. They handed this kind of stuff out in New Jersey for their New Jersey Education Department statewide meeting. As their union statewide meeting, they handed stuff out like this to teachers. Wow.
Yeah. And ICNA, this wonderful Islamic organization that holds annual conferences with 50,000 people attending, this is their task, universal outreach. And their movement is a universal organization, okay, which has links all over the world. And this outreach is necessary to spread the Islamic message, designed to call all people to Islam, to strengthen their belief, and to organize them to wage jihad. Out in your face. And what is jihad? Warfare against Christians and Jews and non-Muslims to force Islam.
Now, understand that there are different levels of jihad. You can read the 1915 fatwa. Anybody interested in a copy of that can send me an email. I'll give you my email real quick. It's BEREAN_research@yahoo.com. Just send me an email asking for the 1915 fatwa. I'll send you a copy of it. This is something everyone needs to know. And I'm hoping, Yahoo, not Gmail.
Oh, Yahoo, sorry.
Yeah. So I'm saying this is something you all should have. You should understand these 3 levels of jihad stated by this, and you're going to see, when you read this, you're going to sit there and go, oh my God. Then I ask you, if you're interested, you can also ask me for Dr. Morgenthal's story. Dr. Morgenthau was the U.S. ambassador to, what was it? Not Turkey, before Turkey, it was the Ottoman Empire. The L should be a U for Dr. Morgenthal's story. And you'll read that and you'll hear the horrible story of the takedown of the Armenian. You'll read about the Armenian genocide, and he gives you all the details on that. And this is the stuff people need to see, because you see the beginning of why this. Now, here's the interesting part. In the United States, they hid this document for over 50 years because they were afraid it might incite people to commit acts of jihad. Under Obama, they started to require social studies teachers to teach about the Armenian genocide. Well, in the United States, there is an ethics clause for social studies teachers. You have to teach cause and effect. So people like me asked, are you going to require us to teach the 1915 fatwa? Do you understand what that means? I mean, the United States government hid it because if we're using this, we might be telling children they have to be committing acts of jihad. And the interesting thing is, as a result, we're not actually teaching the Armenian genocide.
And that is shocking. I mean, that is shocking. They murdered. The whole story about Kemal Ataturk is just one big propaganda lie. It's crazy how they got away with that. Yeah. Snake Eater, your thoughts? And I see Dr. K's changed his picture there.
Every day I spend learning. Like these past 2 weeks, it's just been a Christmas holiday, so I'm like, all right, cool, let me just learn. It's just been like my mind's just been blown every day. So even as I'm listening to Paul, I'm just like, yeah, like mind blown. Like what is this? Like what's going on? Like where are we? Like that this is happening, right?
They infiltrate and they take over organizations. Like someone's mentioning here, UNRWA. I mean, they're like the Borg. They will infiltrate and they will co-opt anything and everything. This is what they have done. Yeah.
It's
so what
really
was shocking?
scary.
Well, yeah. So what else were you watching that really stood out to you? Things that you think that others should know and learn, and questions they should ask. Snake
So
Eater.
I guess myself, like I'd classified myself as agnostic, right? But I think it's like etymology is really important, right? So knowing the meaning of words. So as I kind of like started diving into the community, I started watching videos about Gnosticism and gnosis, the meaning. And I was just like, oh, I better be careful for I label myself as something that like I might not really identify with, right? And then the history of atheism is what I watched as well. So it's just like all that. Like it seems like it leads back to gnosis, which is just in terms of value wise, totally antithetical to the values of Christianity and Catholicism and like the West. So it's just like you have to really understand these definitions if you want to really engage with this, right?
True. I mean, we've lost touch. Something that many years ago I learned from someone I did many shows with about the trivium. I had no idea what it was, but it's about logic, grammar, and rhetoric. And the rules of logic allow you to create arguments, to understand facts. And then your grammar allows you to articulate, to understand, to put those ideas together and to articulate them well and logically, coherently. And then rhetoric allows you to speak in a way that is compelling, convincing, persuasive. But you'll find that Muslims have rhetoric, but they lack proper grammar and they absolutely, positively avoid logic like the plague. And we need to bring back the trivium. We need to. I've spent a lot of time working on logic on my channel, just logic. And I mean, obviously grammar is implicit in that. And for rhetoric, I use sarcasm, which works for me. Paul, you laugh there. What's your thoughts? And then I'll sneak you to
I always have a good laugh because majority of Muslims who want to debate can't even understand the word debate, and that's because they never look up anything about logic. The part that really makes me laugh, they can't grasp fallacies, and it's like I give out awards to people. Hey, you win the Mr. Fallacious of the Year award. All right. They don't understand that their usage of terms and words and the way they put things is telling everybody they're lying through their teeth. The catch is that unless you study logic, which again I've yet to meet a Muslim who really has seriously studied logic and took it to heart.
Well,
I don't. Have you ever met
relies on
one?
logic, and they're not allowed to. And Daniel says here, you can't take the piss in a Muslim country. You must pay for it, or it's theft. That's logical. Yeah.
I would actually, if I had more money, I would pay Muslims to take logic. They would leave Islam. It would be very quick if they understand. I mean, again, I would like them to read their own books, but that's not the reason they leave Islam.
Yeah, but they don't teach logic. They learn hiyal. Hiyal is counter logic. Hiyal is rhetoric, designed to subvert and completely destroy logic again. It's to baffle you with BS. That's what hiyal is. Dr. K, are you there, my man? Are you able to chime in? Are you having a technical issue? Let us know.
No, I'm here. Yeah, I changed my background since we were talking about camel urine. I actually have a commercial for it. Paul, you've seen it
Okay.
before, right? It's like a minute plus, giving you all the benefits of, Jamal's Taste of Arabia's. You guys can find it on my YouTube channel. What was it? Babyface Daily Rants. When I used to do political satire, so I did some Islamic satire about the
Hey,
benefits of Muhammad's wise medicinal expertise.
hey, Kufar, how many people you do fun debates? Usually it's text or talking, but how many Muslims have you find that actually can grasp logic?
Absolutely zero.
Yeah, but is it that they cannot, or that they realize to engage in logic is antithetical to their position because logic would expose them?
Well, I mean that could be true. First, I have a hard time finding Muslims who actually want to debate me because I'm not the kind of guy that will let them run to the Bible, and that's kind of like their safety blanket, their pacifier. Oh, what about the Bible? Where did Jesus say this? So one of the things that either they're doing it on purpose, but when you ask them a hard question, and it's really a simple question, dealing with any of the claims that they make, they know that if they give the correct answer, then they just pretty much destroyed, the claim of the Quran or the claim of Islam. So they'll do, I call it the Muslim shuffle, right? They can't answer the question, but they'll tell you everything else uh, just to avoid it. I find
Hmm.
that they also lack reading comprehension, right? Whether it's on purpose or not. You and I would read something, and we would come to a certain conclusion. They read the same thing, and I don't even know what the heck they're talking about.
Hmm.
To give you an
Yeah, I mean,
example of this, Kufar and I were doing a show, and we had a gentleman come on and challenge me to a debate, and he couldn't understand the word debate. I kid you not. It took us 20, was it
Oh,
20 or 50
Aladdin,
minutes?
our friend Aladdin, yes, Aladdin.
And I ended
oh,
up
that
telling
guy's
him
retarded.
he
I'm
was
sorry.
not cognitively ready to debate, is what I ended up
Yeah.
telling him. It took 20 to 40 minutes to figure out what a simple word meant. I said, "You're not cognitively ready to debate me." I said,
That's why we call him the Filipino dancer.
yeah, yeah, he can dance, but he definitely can't use his brain.
Yeah, that guy's got issues, man. I've tried to speak to him in the past.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's just so pointless.
I mean, if you guys actually want to have some fun and you got some time to spare and you're bored, just go to my YouTube channel and look up the playlist called Debates. All the debates that I've ever done, and I've been doing this for 12 years, uh, at least the ones that I've recorded, they're on there. And the last two that I've done are like completely hilarious.
Yeah, let me just since we're talking about this, just so you know, now I've got to find it again. Okay, here we go. In mysticism, so this is a term that we're going to deal with called adab al jadal, right? But notice it hangs out here. So we've got to look at the word adab. Adab is a synonym of hiyal, right? Adab also means a custom or a sunnah, right? So in mysticism, the norms of conduct which govern relations between master and disciples and between those of the disciples themselves. This tells us that there's an element here of mysticism, of the esoteric, of the occult, right? You're dealing with mystics. So understand there's a connotation there, one application. But in military science, the plural form of adab is a synonym of hiyal, or stratagems in war. So this is deception in warfare, propaganda for warfare. And adab al-jadal in theology and in law, a method of debating in which we discuss questions that were controversial. It was not a matter of finding the truth. So in their debates, it's not about finding truth, but of convincing the opponent. It is rhetoric to persuade. So that, and this practice goes back to the 800s. This is a like a ninth century practice. These guys have a lot of time. They're professionals doing this. That's not part of the culture. Your thoughts on that, Snake Eater, before I speak to the rest?
Yeah, it's I've had those like arguments where it's like he's like he wants to debate, but I'm like we're not having a debate. Like I'd say like, hey, like if you can't provide evidence for this, like you can't prove this or disprove this, then we don't have an argument, do we? Like, I mean, he's just like, yeah, and I'm like, okay, I guess let's just drop this because it's like this isn't going anywhere. Okay?
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I just get so frustrated because I just want to have a discussion and just bring up facts, and they don't want to do that. This is not part of what they want to do. Paul, pardon your thoughts?
I think the humor here is the what this again what Lloyd does and what I do, and you continually put up the documents. Why? Because you give them no wiggle room. And I say give no wiggle room because we're providing factual information written by their sources, which they can't deny. And then they want to run and hide, well, and say, well, that's not true. Well, then you're denying, okay, especially when we're talking about Sharia. So you're telling us Allah's a liar. No, I never said that. So you're telling us Allah's a deceiver. No, I never said that. But you're disagreeing. You told us beforehand it said this, and now you're trying to change the topic, so you're still refusing to accept. It's humorous. And this is the thing, the big danger I think that Christians face is they do not call out the fallacious reasoning. I want more Christians out there, more non-Muslims out there saying, "Oh, thank you, Mr. Fallacious. Thank you for providing a great demonstration of not understanding logic." Give them credit. Call out their fallacies. I mean, yeah. Oh, you're great at circular reasoning. I just want to let you know you should get an award in that. Say those things to them and make them go look up those words.
But I think I think something that's kind of troubling is that like people who study Islam or Muslims are in institutions like medicine and stuff like that, right? It's like, how can you be a doctor and then have some of these views? Didn't you take the Hippocratic Oath? So it's like you endorse like having sex with kids, and then like it's just like don't you see like the contrast? Like it's like, how can you serve everybody equally? Like, can you serve like a kafir as well as someone from your religion?
You know
equally?
the old saying, when you serve two masters, you have to lie to one.
That's true. When I talk to Muslims about Muslim doctors, they will say this to me. They would rather have someone trained in the United States than trained in a Muslim country, because what they learned in Muslim countries is not the same. And this is important to understand. The requirements here, I would say in the Western world, are far different. You might get somebody qualified to be a doctor in an Islamic country that might be qualified to be a nurse's aide in a Western country. That's the difference. If you're going to allow someone to become a medical doctor who tells you that a female has sperm, her sperm is coming from her breasts, we have a problem. Or they'll tell you the guy's sperm comes from his backbone. Really? Where did you study anatomy? That's my next question. So if you're going to say those things and you want to be my doctor, I'm sorry, I'm going to pick someone else.
Yeah. Snake Eater, I mean, you were saying also that we were talking about the things that you think that people should ask, questions they should ask, and things they should know when exploring Islam, the things that opened your eyes. I mean, just tell us a bit more about that. I want to touch on logic again in a minute, but please go on.
Like, there's some videos I want to watch. Like, there's one on the Aristotelian logic that you had on Rumble. I didn't see it on YouTube. I don't know why, but yeah, like some videos I want to watch on that. But honestly, like, I think like if I was to come in again, I totally agree with you, Paul. Like, I kind of misspoke a little bit, but like I totally agree with you that does take that bucket of water first to just kind of like hit you, and you'd be like, wow, like, you know what I mean, like that wow effect to understand what the general context is, like where, like how big the situation is. And then it's like, honestly, there's tons of material I need to go through. Like, there's just tons. But in terms of videos, I was like, I really liked monotheism. And then going through, I guess, the atheism stuff, I think is really important. If you're calling yourself an atheist or an agnostic, and even just knowing about gnosis and the history of gnosis, because then that gives way to understanding where all these kind of like superstitious withholding of like higher degree of knowledge, like we have the true knowledge, this high knowledge, like every group you see with that is just like, oh, they're a Gnostic group, like where there's this highest knowledge that's not available to everybody else, but if you join us, you might be privy to this super secret, like, oh, you're a cult, like
Yeah.
like it's like, oh, that it all
No.
is based in Gnosticism. So it's just like once you know about Gnosis and Gnosticism, you kind of like can see all these derivatives, right?
Right. No, agreed. That's actually a really good point. That's a great point. Paul, anything? Or I'm going to just jump into some trivium for a moment. But over to you
I
first.
think the most revealing thing you're going to find out about Islam, if you're just starting in, and if you're smart enough to understand and grasp that there is secret knowledge in Islam, you might have good fun reading the beginning of The Reliance of the Traveler, where you'll see tons of Gnostic statements there. When I listened to Lloyd show one of these, and I already knew my first time reading anything about Islam that there was Gnosticism involved. It's an easy thing to find, but I think it's worth digging into because there's a lot more there than most people can grasp, and that's where I think Lloyd's research on this topic is extremely valuable.
Someone said haq, like they mentioned haq, that if Jesus is truth, and Islam and Allah is al-haq. Technically, I'm going to get it wrong because I don't have the reference in front of me, but al-haq technically isn't truth. It's like the substrate of reality. It's the perception of the ultimate foundation of the truth, the fabric of this the universe, right, Paul? It's a weird esoteric concept. It's like an occultic concept. It's not truth as you know it. It's knowing, but the whole concept of Islamic gnosis is subjective. It's entirely subjective. You feel, you
beyond
sense.
truth. It's this extra.
Yeah.
There's always levels. There's always some other level you can go to that's not high enough.
And you, yes,
the 100 levels that promised to jihadis. Really, I mean, okay, 100 levels more here, 100 levels more there. Okay.
And you have to turn off your brain because they say, look, you've got to, using these incantations, you have to exit your rational mind, your logical mind. You have to enter into pre-rational and post-rational states. So the state before rational, because rationality is a cage. You get trapped. Reason is a cage, you see. You've got to break out of reason, which is Satan's cage, and you've got to go into pre-rational and post-rational subjective states where you feel it. It's woke, man. Woke, solidly woke. It's got nothing to do with reason or logic, and it's mysticism, but it's detached from reality completely. I'm just going to bring up, this is the trivium just for everyone. I covered this in my series on faith and reason with Aristotle and Aquinas. So the trivium were foundational to classical education in ancient Greece and Rome. Then you added the quadrivium, but let me stick to the trivium: grammar, rhetoric, and logic. So fundamental skills necessary for effective communication and critical thinking. Grammar is correct use of language rules, because you think in language, you think in grammar. So the better your grammar, the better you can think, the better you can articulate. And the structure of communication uses grammar. Good grammar means you can effectively communicate ideas and ensure clarity and coherence in your thinking, your writing, and so on. Rhetoric is persuasive public speaking and writing. So this means someone who speaks really well, who articulates well, who pronounces well, who, Shakespeare would be very, very strong in rhetoric, right? So this is, you're able to make emotional appeals and describe things in ways that lead people, right? Of course, this is dawa. We can understand this as dawa. In fact, the word madhab, right? The 4 schools of jurisprudence are the 4 madhabs. Madhab is effectively rhetoric. These were not the best scholars. These were not the most correct scholars. These were the most persuasive, convincing scholars. They were able to convince the most people. Therefore, they were considered the most correct. Not because they were factually right, but because they were able to baffle people and lead them. And then logic are the principles and methods of reasoning and argumentation. And I'm just going to go briefly. Any question or comment on that while I'm on this, guys?
I just see this comment about someone writing about Bernadette Solomon's writing about Barack, and like I'm just thinking about a doctor still. I'm like, wait, you believe in medicine and like Barack like existed? Like it's like okay.
Yeah.
Like anyway, sorry.
Yeah, no. So I'll go through the three laws of non-contradictory logic, right? The three laws of thought, law of identity. So A is A. A is not B. A man is a man. A woman is a woman. A man is not a woman. A cat is a cat. A cat is not a dog. If you say the apple is red, we affirm the identity of the apple being red and not another color, right? An apple is not an orange. So that's the law of identity. Something is what it is. So the word that describes it is what it is. The whole claim on the woke of a man is a woman, this is called nominalism. This is a totally subjective, contradictory philosophy. I've covered that already. I've got several episodes of nominalism. It is a corrosive ideology or philosophy. And then law of excluded middle. The statement must be either true or false. There's no middle ground or third option. It asserts that for any proposition, it is either true or its negation is true. So a woman is pregnant or not pregnant. There's no middle ground. And the law of non-contradiction. A proposition cannot be both true and false at the same time in the same way. It asserts that contradictory statements cannot both be true. So in symbolic logic, it can be expressed as not and then A and not A. For example, if we say this apple is both red and not red, or I'm 6'5" and I'm 5'3", then that is a contradiction because the apple cannot simultaneously possess and lack the attribute of being red. So these laws form the foundation of classical logic and are essential for reasoning and logical consistency. So yeah, any comments on those before next topic?
Nope, not really.
Yeah, so back to you, Snake Eater. I mean, you were saying, so what else was it that, so the atheism stuff, why was that important to you? What did that teach you?
I think like it's a fallback for people who may not define themselves with a religion or find themselves attracted to religion. Okay, that's fine. But do you understand what this implies? Like what the history of this word is, the etymology, where did this come from before you identify with this group, right? So it's like, I think it's just a de facto thing people say, like, oh, like I'm an atheist because they may not identify with religion. But I think you have to understand like what it is you're tying yourself to.
Right. Yeah. I mean, atheism is just a religion like any other. If you go back into its modern history, its ancient history, it is, and it's always tied to some whack job ideas.
Yeah, just seeing like is it the nuns of Compiègne in France and their execution? I was just like, this is just nuts. Like it's just nuts. It's just senseless.
Yeah, actually, we find that. Um, yeah, hold on. Yeah. Um, what made you feel that my work was actually believable? I mean, well, what convinced you? What led you to accept that what I was saying was actually credible?
I think what I liked was just sources. Like it's just the sources are just there. Okay, here's the book. I here made my statement. Here's the book. Back it up. Here's the book. Back it up. And it's just like it's just overwhelming evidence, right? And I think you said a couple of times like you like to deliver overwhelming evidence. And I'm like, you can feel that. That's one. Two is like the repetition, especially in monotheism, is like it was a 5-part series, I think. And it's just you're repeated like you just see the pattern building. You see a pattern building. You see the pattern building. It's like more evidence, more evidence, more evidence. And then just from like a speck of dust, you end up with this solid rock. And it's just like, okay, like this, like we've built this up now. Like you can't deny it anymore. You know what I mean?
That's good to
Like
know.
if the sources are there that someone can go look them up themselves, then there's no argument. Like, what is there to argue?
Yeah, I mean, the Nuns of Compiègne is a very sad story. I mean, it's the capstone on like the atrocities of the Vendée. You know, I mean, the murders, the atrocities, the deaths. It's shocking. It is incredible how atheism, the very first atheist state, was one of the most immoral, violent, and I mean genocidally brutal experiments that ever happened. It is incredibly shocking. I mean, you know, carrying babies on the point of a bayonet or pike that had run through the mother and child in a single stroke. I mean, the barbarity, throwing babies off balconies, catching them on bayonets. I mean, this is what they did to Christians. And it's just horrific, you know? So, yeah. Yeah, pity is not revolutionary. That's just one of those things.
Yeah, it's just like, I guess it's all about these, like, the suffering of people. Like, how much suffering do people have to go through, like, to get in, like it's just not right to do that much harm to people. So when you see like the slave trade, like the Islam slave trade, and like 270 million people were supposedly enslaved from that, it's just like, you're like, wow, like how far does this have to go, right? I mean, like when's enough? When is it like, okay, this is too much, right?
Yeah. No, I'm actually, hold on. Someone just mentioned something. That was a good point that they just raised. Let me bring that up. Okay, yeah. Someone just mentioned, but what about the Crusades and all those, which is a good point for them to raise, and I'll do that. Just so you know, let me share that. This is so several of the top, at least 8 of the top professors on warfare, on the history of war, created what they call the Encyclopedia of Wars, and it was edited by Charles Phillips and Alan Axelrod, and it's several thousand pages long. I think it's 3 volumes, and they calculated all of the wars. Now the way they calculated the wars, like for instance, the Peloponnesian Wars happened over, I think, 250 years. They counted it as one war, although there were at least there were hundreds of battles. I mean, you can add hundreds of battles to that. So they just lumped it in as one war. So in theory, if they'd broken it up, they could have made it into hundreds more wars. So they said there were 1,763 wars by cause over the last 10,000 years. And they said basically, if you look at religious wars, right, 3.8% of all warfare had some religious component, right? 93% of all wars were government or secular wars that had nothing to do with religion. And when they said he had a religious component, right, so basically, let's say 7% had some sort of religious component, but you could argue that it maybe wasn't, right? But there just happened to be religious people involved. However, so 3.8% is all other religions, and 3.2%, more than half of that total here, I mean, almost 100% of that total, is just Islam. Islam alone is responsible for almost half of all religious war. Islam on its own, right here. I mean, that just tells you that Islam is violent, brutally violent, if you compare based on this. So when atheists talk about this, I think we should abolish governments. And atheist governments, as we know from the French Revolution, we cannot have atheist governments. As we know from Pol Pot, as we know from the USSR, we need to avoid atheist governments at all costs because they're all communists and they're all genocidal. If I go here, this is the great big book of horrible things, the definitive chronicle of history's 100 worst atrocities. Here you can add religious conflicts, Taiping Rebellion. This is in China, 30 Years' War, Mahdi Revolt, Crusades. So here you've got human sacrifice, the gladiatorial games. Now you can say that, look, some of these are not religious issues, right? But just for the sake of entertaining them, we've included 13 of the 100 worst atrocities have a religious component. And look here, Hui Rebellion, that's got nothing to do with Christianity. Okay, so War in the Sudan, French Wars of Religion, Crusades, Mahdi Revolt, and so on. And then, of course, atheists are going to come and tell you, but you see, the Earth actually only had like 49 people on it at that time. And when you calculate these 13 events, right, versus the rest, it actually means that 47 of these people were killed by religion and only 2 people survived, luckily. And because of the ratios with sorry, anyway, I fell asleep. What was I saying? So anyway, that's what you're going to hear. Moving on, thoughts?
I'm going to be interrupted, so I'm not going
Yeah,
to
we should.
comment.
We'll
I
call it
think
in 5
people
minutes.
need to be very cautious when they talk about the Crusades, and don't start talking about the Crusades until you start looking at the cause of the Crusades.
Yeah,
And it had nothing to do with Christianity. It had to do with an invasion of many lands by a barbaric, disgusting group of people who would rape women and children. And I can go on and on to the atrocities. And they did, and the Christians did nothing for hundreds of years.
yeah, hundreds exactly. Yeah, Actually, yeah, I'll show one stat here. For instance, this is World War One, a 4-year period. This is the Crusades, which is what, 400 years? So I don't know. You tell me. 204 years. This is a 200-year period. That's the Crusades. That's World War One. World War Two has similar numbers, if not worse. So yeah, you work it out. I mean, the statistics are just very clear, but people want to sort of claim that yeah, but the Crusades, they have to harp on that because they've got very little to work with. There's very little evidence. So yeah, the last couple of minutes. So over to you again, Snake Eater.
Yeah, like I have like family, right? So I don't want them to fall into like the arms of this. Like it's horrible. I've like young family, like kids in my family. It's like I'd never want them to be exposed to this, right? So whether that's like being married off at 9 years old, 10 years old, like I would never want that for them. So it's like it seems like just like my duty to learn about this and educate myself and become as like fluent in it as possible so that I can like really like fend it off wherever it is. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's just I think it's like everybody's responsibility to really like learn about this. Like really.
Learn about it, talk about it, put it on social media, have discussions about it. It's time that we spread the truth. I think we should be unashamed of, because we are up against an enemy that is relentless. They're not going to stop until they are stopped. Rather stop them with words than you have to stop them with bullets at your front gate. It's my final word in the subject. Dr. K, Paul, before we'll call it a night, I think.
I mean, you know, the Muslims will claim like World War One was done by Christians, World War Two, right, to minimize what Islam has done. But one thing that I have never seen done is uh, whether a comparison or a debate is looking at the first, I'd say the first 300 years, uh, the formation of Christianity versus the formation of Islam, right? Because the Crusades were uh, roughly about 400 years after Islam had been doing its thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like it was right off the bat. They were tolerant, they were patient, but then it just got to the point that, when you push somebody up against the wall and you give them no option, then the Crusades happen. Yes, there were many crusades, and some of them, well, let's just say things were done that shouldn't have been done. But when we look at the the first 300 years of each one of these religions, I mean, there's no comparison. I mean, we
Yeah.
actually conquered the Roman Empire without any bloodshed. There were no wars, right? The Christians didn't go to war with the Romans, which is something that nobody has done. But when you look at Islam, and the Muslims to tell you, well, Islam teaches to only fight, defensively. But my question to Muslims is, how did you conquer all these lands? I'm not going to say countries because we didn't have the countries that we have today. But how did you conquer all these lands defensively? Because defensively means that you're attacked. When did Egypt, right,
We need
attack?
the French. We need the
Yeah,
French attack them in the late 600s for them to invade France in the 690s and early 700s.
I mean, exactly. So it was done basically for three reasons. One, their ultimatum. You have three choices. One, yeah, become a Muslim. Two, become a dhimmi. But that's only if you're, the people of the book. Become a dhimmi and pay an extortion tax to stay alive and to live in your own country, in your own home. Or four, yeah, we're just going to fight you and unalive you. That's
Hmm.
basically it. I mean, even people like Professor Yasakata, he says we got to stop the saying that Islam wasn't spread by the sword. It was. Unlike Christianity, you know, if you look at the first 300 years before the church in Rome became one, it was the opposite. Christians were being persecuted. I mean, we were being used as toys in the arenas, right? We were used as you know lamps to light up the roads, right? compare that to Islam and see which one was it. I might even do something on that. But yeah, I was just curious that I've never really seen anybody do the comparison between, the first two, I'd say the first 300 years before, like I said, before the church and the Roman Empire became one. And just take a look at it. Who spread by the sword? Who was persecuted?
Yeah. Not fair enough. Yeah. Any final words, guys? We'll call it a day here.
I guess the
I'm
last
real-
thing I just say is sorry to interrupt you, Paul. You want to say something?
I'm real worried about getting interrupted by announcements, but I'll say this: that again, I think people need to delve into history, delve into. If you have a faith structure, look into it, find out what it really believes versus what people tell you it believes. Be the ones to do the research. Do your own research. Don't trust what other people say.
And by the way, for those people, Germany started World War One because of Darwinism. You'd be amazed. Darwin was an evil man. People have no idea. World War II, well, Darwin was there too, but we'll discuss that. I have discussed it in the past. And final word to you, Snake Eater.
I guess I'll just Paul, you summed up great. I just wanted to say thank you for everybody here for allowing me to even have this platform. That's awesome. Like to just allow someone who's not an expert on this level at all. But I think it's just like vote with your wallet. Speak with your wallet. Like if you don't want to take part in it, don't take part in it. Don't give them money. Like don't participate in those businesses. Like it's just don't. Like if you don't want your money going into that, don't put your money into it. Like
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Yeah, so guys, we call it a night here. Paul has to run. But thank you for joining us, Paul, last minute. And thanks all for being here at this last minute broadcast. Much appreciated. And thanks for having the courage to come on, Snake Eater and Dr. K. As always, we will be doing something again soon.
Pleasure.
So guys, Merry Christmas. If I don't see you before, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. Anyone that says Happy Holidays, make jihad on them, okay? It's only fair. They earned it.
All right, guys. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Cheers, guys. Good night. God bless.
good night.